Good morning, everyone. Myself, Saumya Grover, Assistant Professor, Jagannath University. Today, we'll be talking about levels of communication. When we talk about levels of communication, there we will study in it intrapersonal communication, about Johari window, interpersonal communication, about the ways of improving interpersonal relationships, about interpersonal relationships, the meaning, process, Johari window, functions, importance. So let's start with the introduction. There are four basic levels of communication. These levels are distinguished basically by the number of persons involved in the process of communication. Also, these different forms of communication differ in the degree of proximity or closeness among the participants in the communication process, both at the physical and emotional levels. Another differentiating feature is the nature of the feedback, which could be immediate or delayed. So these levels are intrapersonal communication, communication with ourselves, interpersonal communication, communication between two persons, group communication, communication within a group, mass communication, public communication, communication with the public. Let's start with the first level of communication, which is the intrapersonal communication. The word intra denotes within. When we communicate within ourselves, it is intrapersonal communication. It is a kind of internal dialogue that takes place within an individual while contemplating, conceptualizing, and formulating our thoughts or ideas before we actually express them. This can take the form of thinking, analyzing, dreaming, or introspecting. It is a silent or verbal type of communication. The meaning of intrapersonal communication. Daydreaming, self talk, and memories are all facets of intrapersonal communication. This is mental conversation or communication with you. Some scholars also include in this area physical mechanisms like the sensation of hunger, pain, and pleasure. Anytime you communicate with yourself, it is considered intrapersonal communication. Examples of intrapersonal communication are to-do lists, journals, assignment, notebooks, and calendars. Any kind of reminder to do something later, congratulating yourself on a job well done, or any kind of thinking to you is intrapersonal communication. It is the most basic level of communication. We are both sender and receiver of this type of communication. For intrapersonal communication, we use our nervous system. There are two important parts of the nervous system: the central nervous system, known as CNS, and the peripheral nervous system, known as PNS. The central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord. The peripheral nervous system consists of the nerves present all over our body in the form of a network. Both the PNS and the CNS are used for generating, receiving, and processing of the stimuli. For example, when there is pain at any part of our body, the nerve endings at that place send the message to the brain through the peripheral nervous system. The brain processes this message and instructs about the possible remedy. This type of communication occurs often without our being aware of it. But mostly the individual is aware of most of the intrapersonal communication. We use our brain waves as a channel, and the feedback is thoughts or ideas, sometimes decisions, and sometimes actions or behavior. Now, how intrapersonal variables affect communication? Though we affecting the communication around us, but many times personality and past experiences influence our behavior. Thus, it is important to consider the intrapersonal factors that influence the communicators. Certain intrapersonal factors that affect communication at the basic level are personal orientation, values, attitudes, belief, opinion, and prejudices. Personal orientation. The way you react to a particular situation will be determined by your personal orientation. Your reaction to a particular situation reflects the values, attitudes, beliefs, and opinions that make your personality orientation. Values. Each of us maintain a set of values, moral or ethical judgment of things we consider important. Values can be a source of conflict within an individual, as well as a barrier between people of opposing standards. For example, parents may scold their children for dishonesty, but think nothing of cheating on their income tax. Attitude. An attitude is a learned tendency to react positively or negatively to an object or situation. It implies a positive or negative evaluation of someone or something. Attitudes operate at three different levels: cognitive, affective, and instrumental. The cognitive level involves a particular belief, the affective level involves a particular feeling, and the instrumental level involves overt behavior or action. Belief, opinion, and prejudices. A belief is anything accepted as true. An opinion lies somewhere between an attitude and a belief. It means a positive or negative reaction. Not all our beliefs and opinions are well founded. Sometimes they are based on preconceived ideas and not on our own actual experiences. In such case, they are prejudices, formed judgments about a particular person, group, or a thing. Now, let's discuss the process of intrapersonal communication. The elements that set the process in motion are called stimuli. Intrapersonal communication starts with a stimulus. Our intrapersonal communication is the reaction to certain actions or stimuli. These stimuli could be internal, originating from within us, or external, coming from an outside source. The brain is made aware of the state of the body by nerve impulses, internal stimuli that can prompt you to respond by communicating. Let's say you have the flu, your muscle ache, your fever is high, and you are depressed. Such a miserable state may prompt you to call a doctor to relieve your physical ills and a friend to relieve your depression. External stimuli, of course, those stimuli that originate in the environment outside of your body. They are picked up by the sensory organs and then sent to the brain. More than one overt stimulus usually affects a person at any given moment. For example, the pizza being advertised on TV and the sounds and aromas coming from the kitchen can prompt an eager, "What's for dinner?" These stimuli are picked up by the sensory organs PNS and then sent to the brain. This process is called the reception. The sense organs pick up a stimulus and send it to the central nervous system through the peripheral nervous system. External receptors for the five senses sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch receive stimuli that are changed into nerve impulses and then sent to the brain. These external receptors are located on or near the body's surface and react to physical, chemical, and mechanical stimuli to provide you with information about the environment. Internal receptors, such as nerve endings, on the other hand, convey information about your interior state. The dryness of your mouth or the fullness of your stomach. While we receive all stimuli directed to us, we pay attention to only a few. This is because we practice selective perception. Only high intensity stimuli like loud sounds, bright colors, sharp smells, etc. are perceived and the low intensity stimuli are overlooked. The next step is processing of the stimuli. It occurs at three levels. These levels are cognitive, emotional, and psychological. Cognitive processing, thinking, is associated with the intellectual self and includes the storage, retrieval, sorting, and assimilation of information. Cognitive processing is not simply the sum of memory storage, retrieval, and sorting functions. Rather, it involves assimilation, the process of incorporating some aspect of the environment into the whole set of mental functioning in order to make sense out of what goes on around us. For example, whenever you open a book, you retrieve this information, use it to sort the letters on the page into words, and then assimilate the words into sentences and ideas that have meaning for you. Emotional processing. The feeling is associated with the emotional self. This does not have anything to do with logic or reasoning. All our emotions and our attitude, belief, and opinions interact to determine our emotional response to any stimulus. Psychological processing occurs at the psychological level and is associated with our psychological self. This kind of response is reflected in our bodily behaviors like heart rate, brain activity, muscle tension, blood pressure, and the body temperature. The next activity in intrapersonal communication is transmission. The process by which messages are sent from a source to a receiver is called transmission. In intrapersonal communication, the source and the receiver are the same person. Thus, transmission takes place through nerve impulses in their brain rather than through sound waves in the air of words written on a page. The intrapersonal communication cycle is completed when the brain reacts to these nerve impulses by transmitting a message to smooth muscles, which regulate the movements of the body. Putting a hand on a hot pan causes the individual's touch receptors to send a neural transmission to the brain saying it's hot. which causes the brain to transmit a message to the muscles in the hand, ordering move away from the pan immediately. Intrapersonal communication also has feedback. Here it is called self-feedback. However, there are two kinds of self-feedback, external and internal. External self-feedback is the part of your message that you hear yourself. This kind of feedback enables you to correct your own mistakes. Internal self-feedback is usually picked up through bone conduction, nerve endings, or muscular movements. For example, you might perceive an awkward facial gesture without actually seeing it simply by feeling the muscle tension in your face. The next element of intrapersonal communication is interference or noise. A sudden sound disturbing our thought process is interference. Another form of interference occurs when we process some information at a wrong level. For example, we are supposed to process bad news rationally, that is, through cognitive processing. But we often react to such news through emotions. On the other hand, some individuals insist on processing information on the cognitive level, when an emotional response would actually be more helpful. Often, a good cry can relieve the pressure of a bad day better than a careful rehash of the day's events. Let's jump up to the next topic, which is the concept of self and Johari window. Physical self, bodily functions like digestion, breathing, circulation, and five senses. Emotional self is the prompts our emotional responses, as in case of fight, fright, and all other emotions. Intellectual self is performing mental actions like words and sentences formation, logical reasoning, problem solving, decision making, and etc. Social self is the projects our personality and help creates our image. Self-concept is the basic for intrapersonal communication because it determines how a person sees him or herself is and is oriented towards others. Self-concept is also called self-awareness, which involves the following factors: physical self, emotional self, intellectual self, and social self. The concept of self-concept can also be understood by Johari window. The Johari window is a communication model that is used to improve understanding between individuals. The word Johari is taken from the names of Joseph Luft and Harry Ingham, who developed the model in 1955. Joe plus Harry Johari. There are two key ideas behind the tool: that you can build trust with others by disclosing information about yourself, that with the help of feedback from others, you can learn about yourself and come to terms with personal issues. There are four quadrants in a Johari window. Number 1 is the open area, quadrant 1. Number 2 is the blind area, quadrant 3. Number 3 is the hidden area, quadrant 3. And number 4 is the unknown area, quadrant 4. Number 1, open area, quadrant 1. This quadrant represents the things that you know about yourself and the things that others know about you. This includes your behavior, knowledge, skills, attitudes, and public and history. This the second area, quadrant 2, blind area. This quadrant represents things about you that you are unaware of, but that are known to others. This can include simple information that you do not know, or it can involve deep issues, for example, feeling of inadequacy, incompetence, unworthiness, or rejection, which are often difficult for individuals to face directly and yet can be seen by others. Next quadrant 3, hidden area. This quadrant represents things that you know about yourself but are not informed to the others, which means that the things which you know about yourself but others do not about yourself. The next quadrant is quadrant 4, unknown area. The last quadrant represents things that are unknown by you and are unknown by others. The ultimate goal of the Johari window is to enlarge the open area without disclosing information that is too personal. The open area is the most important quadrant, as generally the more your people know about each other, the more productive, cooperative, and effective they will be when working together. The process of enlarging the open area quadrant is called self-disclosure, and it's a give and take process that takes place between yourself and the people that you are interacting with. As you share information, your open area expands vertically and your hidden area gets smaller. As people on your team provide feedback to you about what they know or see about you, your open area expands horizontally and your blind area gets smaller. People who have large open area are usually very easy to talk to. They communicate honestly and openly with others, and they get along well with a group. People who have a very small area, open area, are difficult to talk to. They seem closed off and uncommunicative, and they often don't work well with others because they are not trusted. Other people have a large blind area with many issues that they haven't identified or dealt with yet. However, others can see these issues clearly. These people might have low self-esteem or they may have anger issues when working with others. This is all about intrapersonal communication. Now, let's talk about the second level of communication, which is interpersonal communication. Introduction. The social self mess another self as you take your internal messages and send them out. When you turn from thinking, dreaming, and other internal forms of communication, it's time to step out and face the world and connect with other people. Of course, you never leave the self behind, just as you can often recall your dreams during the day. Interpersonal communication is like breathing. It is requirement for life. and like breathing, it is inescapable. Unless you like to live in isolation, we communicate interpersonally every day. Listening to your roommate, talking to a teacher, meeting for lunch with a friend, or talking to your father are all examples of interpersonal communication. Human beings are social animals and we have this usage to communicate with others and share our feelings and ideas. So we think it is the most common form of communication. Actually, intrapersonal communication is the most common form of communication. But as social beings, we attach a lot of importance to interpersonal communication. And in this lesson, we shall discuss about the various aspects of interpersonal communication. Interpersonal communication is the communication between two people. It can take place in any environment and in any place, but it mostly takes place in face-to-face encounters. It is often spontaneous, unplanned, and loosely organized. It does not follow rules of grammar or other such formal restrictions. The meaning. In interpersonal communication, there is face-to-face interaction between two persons. That is, both are sending and receiving messages. So, they can use all five senses to send and receive messages. This is an ideal and effective communication situation because you can get immediate feedback. You can clarify and emphasize many points through your expressions, gestures, and voices. Most interpersonal communication occurs between two persons in close contact, DYAT. Thus, the responsibilities of sending, receiving, processing, evaluating, providing the feedback, etc., are shared between the participants. Here, both the participants alternate their roles as sender and receiver. In interpersonal communication, therefore, it is impossible to influence the other person and persuade him to her or her to accept your point of view. Since there is proximity between sender and the receiver, interpersonal communication has emotional appeal too. It can motivate, encourage, and coordinate work more effectively than any other form of communication. Interpersonal communication mostly involves sharing of meaning. It also involves guiding, counseling, passing instructions or orders, problem solving, decision making, etc. Interpersonal communication can occur in any environment, be it formal or informal. Most of the interpersonal messages are informal, however, and stem for everyday face-to-face encounters. With the exception of telephone conversations, most of the interpersonal communication involves people close enough to see and touch each other. This makes sending and receiving messages much easier and eliminates the need for the kind of formal rules followed in debates, news conferences, or other public speaking situations. Now let's talk about the functions of interpersonal communication. Interpersonal communication involves a direct face-to-face relationship between the sender and receiver of a message who are in an independent relationship. Communication is enhanced when the relationship exists over a long period of time. Interpersonal communication involves not only the words used but also the various elements of non-verbal communication. The purpose of interpersonal communication is to influence, help, and discover, as well as to share and play together. So, interpersonal communication performs three functions. Number one is the linking function. In this, it connects you with your environment. Number two is your mentation. It helps in planning, problem solving. Number three is the regulatory function. It controls our own and others' behavior. The linking function helps an individual to know his or her environment better and get connected to it. The mentation function helps in conceptualizing, remembering, planning, etc. The regulatory function is about controlling our own and others' behavior. Intrapersonal communication is the platform on which all other levels or forms are based. Interpersonal communication is the basis of our growth and survival. It is the sharing of feelings and ideas with other people. We are nurtured physically, emotionally, and intellectually through interpersonal communication. Also, through interpersonal communication, we develop our links and contacts with the world around us. And without interpersonal communication, we would be cut off from this world. It also helps us to function more practically. It touches every aspect of our lives. What are the ways to improve interpersonal communication? We can practice all these by ways to improve interpersonal communication. Be knowledgeable. Competent communicators are knowledgeable. They understand the components, principles, and rules of communication. Understanding these things is a necessary prerequisite for enhancing the communication. But this kind of knowledge does not make you competent. Your knowledge must be coupled with skill, which will acquire through practice. Be skilled. Competent communicators know how to translate knowledge into actions. To develop skill requires practice and helpful feedback from the others who can confirm the appropriateness of your action. Be motivated. You need to be motivated to use your information and skill. You must have a genuine desire to connect with others and to improve so that you may become a competent communicator. Interpersonal relationships. Interpersonal communication is the fundamental means we use to manage our relationships. An interpersonal relationship is the ongoing connection we make with others through interpersonal communication. Relationships are created, nurtured, and even are destroyed because of interpersonal communication or the lack of it. Our interactions with a new acquaintance are different from those with a close friend. When interacting with a stranger, we stand farther apart, use different words, are more likely to feel awkward, and are less certain about how to interpret body language than when we interact with a good friend. Interpersonal communication has been analyzed from two perspectives, relative and developmental. The relative view does not take into account the relationship between those who interact, whereas the development ones define it as communication that occurs between persons who have known each other for some time. It argues that our interaction with a salesperson is different from our interaction with friends and family members. Variables affecting interpersonal relationships. Many variables affect the interpersonal relationships. These are control, trust, self disclosure, feedback, non-verbal behavior, and interpersonal attraction. Our success or failure in handling these variables determine how satisfying our interpersonal relationships will be. Control is the balance in the relationship. It involves understanding each other. Trust is the belief that the other person will not cheat us. Self-disclosure lets others know what we are thinking, how we are feeling, and what we care about. Self-disclosure helps reduce anxiety, increase comfort, and intensify interpersonal attractions. Feedback is the response of a receiver that reaches back the sender. It involves agreeing, asking questions, and responding through feeling statements. Nonverbal behavior plays an important role in interpersonal communication. A smile, a hug, a pat, a firm handshake, etc., can achieve much more than words in certain situations. Eye contact, gestures, posture, facial expressions, etc., are also important elements of our non-verbal behavior. Interpersonal attraction is the ability to draw others towards oneself. Some people are said to have magnetic personalities. People are drawn to them. It is this special chemistry that causes love at first sight. Stages of interpersonal relationship. Common sense tells us that interpersonal relationships can help develop relationships or may break them. And research tells us that interpersonal relationship develops through different phases. It is through our interpersonal contacts with others that our relationships go through a series of development stages. The initial stages of a relationship often involve sharing less intimate or personal information. Later, stages evolve to include more intimate conversations and behaviors. We initiate and form relationships by communicating with those whom we find attractive in some way. We seek to increase our interactions with those with whom we wish to further develop relationships, and we continually interpersonally communicate to maintain the relationship. We also use interpersonal communication to end relationships that we have decided are no longer viable. We can usually identify the stage of a relationship by simply observing the interpersonal communication. We interact differently as we move toward or away from intimacy. Phases of interpersonal relationship development. The phases are initiating, experimenting, intensifying, integrating, and bonding. In the initiating phase, an individual makes conscious and unconscious judgments about the other. In this phase, the communication could be either non-verbal, verbal, or both. In the experimenting phase, the participants talk about general things. This is usually referred as small talk, while trying to find out common interests. Also, both participants try to determine whether continuing the relationship would be beneficial. The third phase is the intensifying phase. It involves increased awareness of both participants about each other and increased involvement in conversation. Self-disclosure by both participants results in trust and creates support. The participants become more informal and open as experiences, assumptions, expectations are shared. At this stage, there is increased intimacy. This includes intimate non-verbal behavior like touching, nodding, physical proximity, etc. In the integrating stage, both the participants try to meet the other expectations. The final stage is the bonding phase. Here, serious commitments and sacrifices are made. Examples of bonding are promise to remain friends, marriage, etc. These five stages may take off few seconds or up to few years. Phases of interpersonal relationship disintegration. Like in interpersonal relationship development, five phases are involved in interpersonal relationship disintegration also. These are differentiating, circumscribing, stagnating, avoiding and terminating. These five stages of interpersonal relationship disintegration can take a few minutes or even a few years depending upon the kind of relationship. Here, the participants get separated from each other in phases. The main reason behind this separation is differences. These differences exist even at the development of relationship stages, but the participants generally ignore them or these differences are overshadowed by the factors that are common to both participants. So, the first phase of relational integration is differentiating. Here, the differences become prominent. At this stage, the participants want more freedom. Also, both participants try to test each other, involvement and commitment in the relationship. The next stage is circumscribing. Here, the participants practice controlled communication and less communication. Also, both participants try to reduce conflict and tension while trying to maintain normalcy in front of others. But in private, there is little communication, even at the nonverbal level. This stage leads to stagnating. Here, all communication is stopped. The next phase is avoiding. Both participating participants try to ignore each other. They behave as if other participant does not exist. Both participants avoid interaction and also maintain physical distance. Stagnating leads to the final stage, that is termination. This may come suddenly or it may be delayed. It depends upon the type of relationship, the strength of the relationship, the effects of disassociation, etc. That's all for today. We have completed two levels of communication. We will be discussing the group communication and public communication in the next class. Thank you very much.